Before we begin, I just want to give my normal disclaimer that when I'm covering somebody, the only person I'm actually criticizing is the person I'm responding to. Even though the person I'm covering is arguing for theism and I am an atheist, that does not mean that I believe all theists agree with the arguments set forward in the video I will be commentating on. If anything, if I were a theist, I would likely find these arguments incredibly offensive. Yes, the video I'm covering argues for theism that poorly. Well, okay, it kind of does and it kind of doesn't. It's a PragerU video which essentially argues that even if you are an atheist, you should teach your children God is real because it will make them happy. Not because these are actually true, they make no attempt to argue that. Instead, they talk about how bringing up a child religiously has benefits compared to bringing up a child secularly. Now, I could sit here and cynically speculate about why somebody would be tempted to make such an argument. However, I would actually rather address the points made on their substance. So, let's dig into this.
As a therapist, I'm often asked why depression and anxiety are so common among children and adolescents.
Okay, here she's talking about rates of anxiety and depression being higher than they previously were, just to be clear on that. However, that isn't something we actually know for sure. There's a very good piece in the Los Angeles Times from early 2023, meaning I'm not blaming this person for not knowing about it at the time of this PragerU video's release. However, it does make the point rather well, so I figured it would be useful as a source here. With the headline, "Are more people depressed and anxious, or are we just getting better at talking about mental health?" Which makes the point that much of the increase in depression and anxiety we see today is not because more people have those two specific issues, but instead is the result of people being more willing to talk about them. Remember, much of what we know regarding the rates of depression and anxiety come from surveys, and as the article says, these surveys aren't taken in a vacuum, though. Willingness to talk about this stuff has changed dramatically, said Ronald Kelser, a Harvard University sociologist whose research focuses on the social determinants of mental health conditions from an epidemiological perspective. The article goes on to say, "It's likely that someone who may have been hesitant to report their depression symptoms to a national survey worker in 2005 is willing to do so now. This is why numbers aren't a pure indicator of whether there are more mental health problems in society," Pescosolido said. Now, it should be noted this article does not say that it is purely increased awareness as opposed to increased prevalence that's causing a rise in mental health issues according to statistics. In fact, it rejects a counter-absolutist notion just as much as it rejects the original absolutist one it set out to debunk. However, it does show that we cannot blame any aspect of modern society specifically for increased rates of depression and anxiety because we just don't know what those rates were previously all that well.
One explanation, almost surely the most neglected, is declining interest in God and religion.
One out of how many exactly? If it were out of, say, 3, then I would be much more willing to take this argument seriously than if it were out of, we'll say, 10,000. Obviously, I'm not expecting you to have an exact number in this video, but you don't even ballpark it by saying, say, 1 in a handful, or something else to imply it is a relatively small amount. Also, how big of a factor is it? That's another question that's actually rather important, but the video never even attempts to answer. Is it only 1% of the equation, or is it, say, 50%? Because both of those answers would lead me to take the argument rather differently.
I see the consequences of this in my practice almost every day. And this is not merely my personal observation. A 2018 Harvard study involving 5,000 people examined how being raised in a family with religious beliefs affects the mental health of children. The study found that kids who attended a religious service at least once per week scored higher on psychological well-being measurements and had lower risks of mental illness.
How much higher, and how much lower for that matter? Are these within the realm of statistical significance? You don't give us any actual statistics, you just insist these numbers are higher and lower than other numbers, but how much higher and how much lower? And what are these numbers in the first place? I should also note that I did check PragerU's sources on this by going to their website and checking the source which corresponded to this line in the video. I then learned that said source contained this paragraph. One limitation of the study is that it consisted mainly of children of white females of relatively high family socioeconomic status, and therefore might not be generalizable to the broader population, though prior research by Vanderwell suggested the effects of religious service attendance for adults may be even larger for black versus white populations. Another limitation was that the study did not look at the influences of parents and peers on adolescents' religious decisions. So immediately, this study is basically saying that you can't use it to draw a conclusion on whether or not you should teach children there's a God. Its data is just not applicable to the population as a whole. Making it kind of strange, this is the study you decided to cite, given it specifically warns against drawing the conclusion you drew from it.
Weekly attendance was also associated with higher rates of volunteerism.
Again, how much higher? I don't really feel like I'm asking for a lot here. All I want is you to explain to me how much these numbers go up so I know they're within the realm of statistical significance. I would also like to know something like the amount of time each group spent volunteering, so I can make sure that even if there is an increase, we aren't already playing with incredibly small numbers, for example, which would cause even the smallest amount of extra time to appear as an incredible jump in the statistics.
Lower probabilities of both drug use and early sexual initiation.
Again, how much did this risk lower? How much was it for the irreligious children? And how much was it for the religious children? I'm not asking for much here, I don't think. Just some basic context to the numbers I'm being told about. Not shown. I want to be very clear, they aren't showing me the numbers. Instead, they are being described to me with incredibly vague terminology. However, these facts about the numbers are totally meaningless without the actual numbers themselves. What I'm saying is basically no information is actually being given here. They're just words that don't communicate anything to the audience other than the vague idea of statistics.
And a sense of purpose.
That one didn't contain any statistics, it was just an absolute statement. One not made in their citation, I should note. It does say they have a greater sense of purpose, to which, well, I asked these people exactly what I asked the PragerU presenter. How much greater, and what was the sense of purpose in each of these groups anyway? For that matter, how do you even quantify something like purpose? But either way, the abstraction was specifically done by the person behind this PragerU video.
I am often asked by parents, how do I talk to my child about death if I don't believe in God or heaven? My answer is always the same. Fake it. There are many things you don't tell your children the full truth about.
But that's not just not telling them the full truth. This is telling them something radically different from what you believe to be true. These aren't even remotely comparable.
For instance, if your children hear about a tragedy that has occurred in your community, you tell them that it will never happen to them. We don't have a crystal ball and cannot know that bad things will not happen to our children. Yet we reassure them with a hopeful narrative.
Okay, so I'll ignore the fact that you're talking in a generality that you can't back up statistically, because this is by no means an absolute. And instead, I'll just say that if a 1 in a million event occurs in your community and your child is not harmed in said event, it's rather unlikely such an incident would happen again because the chances are 1 in a million. At least I think they're supposed to be 1 in a million. The visuals kind of contradict this. This visual, for example, is just a person lying in what I assume is a hospital bed. So are they just dying or dead? Because I thought the whole point of this was it made it easier to talk to your children about death. Now you're saying that we should tell children they'll never die? I don't get what this video is attempting to communicate here. I really don't.
The same applies to believing in God and heaven. Even if you believe that when your life ends, your bones turn to dust and you are gone for eternity, such beliefs don't help children. They only scare them and create anxiety over death and dying.
Oh no, they might develop a sense of self-preservation. The horror. You know, I say that sarcastically, but I can actually provide an example of somebody who was a Christian and later became an atheist. Said person did get anxiety over death when they stopped believing in God. However, they used that as a jumping off point to make better life choices. Said person being Cult of Dusty, who as a Christian was obese and had bad eating habits, but as an atheist he started practicing physical fitness and got a better diet, therefore making him healthier.
Atheism saved my life. No doubt about it. I was on the fast track to a heart attack at age 45. I was gonna die at an early age. There's no doubt about it because I was a big fat motherfucker. So here's the first picture. This is about 6 years ago, right before I started my YouTube channel. I was 255 pounds. I had pretty much just given up on my appearance. I didn't really give a shit, man. I thought Jesus had my back. I thought that me and Jesus were tight. And I prayed all the time that Jesus would help me lose weight. And for some reason, Jesus never fucking helped me. Jesus never came down from heaven and helped the pounds melt away. And back when I was this fat dude, my heart would literally hurt my chest. I used to walk around kind of with my arm crooked because my heart was radiating pain all over the left side of my body constantly. It was fucking scary, man, but I still didn't do anything about it as a Christian. I was so delusional that I thought that if I died of a heart attack, it didn't matter, man. I would just be in heaven with Jesus, where me and Jesus could just eat fucking cheeseburgers for the rest of eternity, and it would be awesome. And then I became an atheist, and shortly thereafter, my dad dropped dead of a heart attack at 54 years old. And he was way thinner than I was, and it scared my ass straight because I realized something. I realized Jesus wasn't going to help me. God wasn't going to help me because they don't exist. Only I could help me. I realized that if I kept going as I was going to give up my one life on this earth. My one chance at existence. I was going to throw it all a fucking way for a bunch of cheeseburgers. And it scared me, man. I realized the responsibility lied on me. It was all on me. Nothing else was going to help me. So I started to research how the body works, and I started to realize the body's just a machine. And when you figure out how that machinery works, you can use that knowledge to help yourself get in shape. You can help yourself be thin, lean, muscular. And I got busy, man, because I didn't want to fucking die. I didn't want to give up my one chance of existence on this earth. Fuck no, man. I like being alive. I like my life. I like experiencing, man. I'm a happy atheist, and I don't want to fucking go anywhere. So I got my ass busy, and I dropped the weight. And as you can tell, fuck yeah, man, I'm aging in reverse. I'm Benjamin Button all up in this motherfucker. I look 15 years younger than I did 6 years ago.
It should also be noted that the notion that religion helps people cope with death, or at least become less afraid of death, isn't entirely true, by the way. Atheists actually fear death about as much as the highly religious, and both fear death less than the moderately religious.
In our current age of broken families, distracted parents, school violence, and nightmarish global warming predictions, imagination plays a big part in children's ability to cope. It is far better for kids to use their imagination constructing something positive, such as a God who cares about us, than the dark nihilistic idea that there's no creator and protector and no purpose to our existence.
And this is what I mean when I say in the introduction that if I were a theist, I would be actively offended by this video. Because what you basically said is that God only exists in our imagination. If I believed that God was real, I would respond by saying a child would not be constructing the idea of a God, but would instead be understanding it. With that said, I have to ask why exactly those are the only two options, and furthermore, why your child is even thinking this much about existentialism. Because I was an atheist as a kid, and I can confirm that I rarely ever thought about the entire universe and how empty it was.
Additionally, religion provides children a chance for community.
So can anything. So can going to the same school as other children, or liking the same video games, or just having similar interests more generally.
Being with people who share their faith can act as a buffer against the emptiness and isolation of modern culture. This is more necessary than ever in a world where teens can have hundreds of virtual friends and few real ones.
I should note this only makes sense if the religion the child is being brought up in is the same one as their peers, or if there's a considerable religious presence in that community already, which you just said's unlikely to be the case because of how secular society is becoming, even on a personal level. To put it another way, this only works if you assume the exact point this video was making at the start was wrong. Anyway, that's all I want to cover. So, final thoughts. This is the most atheistic, pro-theist video I have ever seen. Good night, and good luck.